Hello everyone, Corwin here, and in today's video we will be debunking how the Electoral College benefited slave states. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. The left love to claim that the Electoral College was built for the benefit of slave states, but this is blatantly false. They have no historical evidence to back this up. The evidence actually points to the opposite. For this, we go back to the Constitutional Convention. It's 1787, and they're deciding how the legislative branch should be structured. There were two major proposals at this time. There was the New Jersey Plan and the Virginia Plan. The New Jersey Plan was proposed by William Paterson, who was the delegate of New Jersey in the convention. He proposed for a single house Congress where every state had equal representation. This proposal benefited smaller states such as New Jersey, New Hampshire, and Delaware. Delaware, only one slave state I've mentioned so far. Patterson and other delegates from smaller states feared that New York and Virginia would dominate national policy as they were some of the largest states at this time. The Virginia Plan was proposed by James Madison, who would be a future president. He was the delegate of Virginia and one of the major authors of the final product of the Constitution. His proposal was a two-chamber legislature, one directly elected by the people and the other selected by the state legislatures. Both of these chambers' seats would be apportioned by state population, which would benefit larger states such as Virginia, New York, and Pennsylvania, one slave state mentioned so far. The Virginia Plan was the most likely to pass in the convention at this time, which outraged many of the smaller states, and they even threatened to withdraw from the convention. That's where a compromise came in. Roger Sherman, who was the delegate of Connecticut, came up with the Connecticut Compromise, also known as today as the Great Compromise. He proposed two chambers of Congress, one represented by population that was directly elected by the people of those states, and the other had equal representation regardless of population size, which was selected by the state legislatures. This is what's now known as the U.S. House of Representatives, which we directly elect, and the United States Senate, which up until the passing of the 17th Amendment in 1913, the state legislatures decided who the two senators were every 6 years whenever their terms expired. Now you may be asking, what does the establishment of the legislative branch have to do with the Electoral College? It has everything to do with the Electoral College. For a state's electoral vote count is determined by how many cumulative seats the state has in Congress between the House of Representatives and the Senate. For example, the state of Kansas has 6 electoral votes, 4 for each representative in the House and 2 Senate seats. Now that we have the historical context behind the legislative branch and how it relates to the Electoral College, we will now look at the 1796 and 1860 elections, which were the first and last elections where slavery was legal, excluding the Civil War and Washington's 2 unopposed terms, to further disprove how the Electoral College benefited the slave states. In the 1796 election, there were 8 slave states and 8 free states. Of the 139 electoral votes, 73 were from the free states and 66 were from the slave states. Both slave and free states each had 3 states with 10 or more electoral votes. The free states being Massachusetts, which had 16, New York with 12, and Pennsylvania with 15. The slave states, Maryland had 11, and North Carolina had 12. There was one slave state, Virginia, that had over 20, with 21 at this time. Free states had a 6-point differential in the electorate ahead of slave states, as free states made up 53% of the electorate, while the slave states only made up 47% at this time, meaning that the free states made up a solid portion of the electorate in the 1796 election. The 1860 election is the true smoking gun debunking this myth that the Electoral College benefited the slave states, as there were 18 free states and 15 slave states in this election, making up 303 possible electoral votes up for grabs, meaning you only needed 152 to become president-elect. At this time, the free states made up 183 of those electoral votes, meaning that you could have won every single free state and lose every single slave state, and you would become the president of the United States. And Lincoln did this. He won all but one free state and lost every single slave state, and he wasn't even on the ballot in most of those slave states in the South. Slave states made up only 120 electoral votes. There were 6 free states with over 10 electoral votes, those being Massachusetts with 15, Indiana had 13, Illinois with 11, 3 of which had 20 or more, being Ohio with 23, Pennsylvania with 27, and one of those having 30 or more, which was New York, which had 35 in the 1860 election. Meanwhile, in the South, there were only 5 slave states with 10 or more electoral votes, Virginia having 15, North Carolina having 10, Georgia with 10, Kentucky with 12, and Tennessee with 12. And none had 20 or more, and none had 30 or more at this time in the slave states. Free states made up 60.4% of the electorate, while slave states only made up 39.6% of the electorate at the time, which was a 20.8% difference. It's not even close. Now that you've seen these numbers, it is very clear that throughout the course of history in the United States, when slavery was legal, the slave states always made up a minority of the electorate. There was only one slave state to have ever had 20 or more electoral votes, and there was never a slave state to ever have 30 or more electoral votes. Virginia was the only state to ever have 20 or more electoral votes from 1796 to 1840. And as I said before, it never reached 30. It dropped under 20 in 1844, where it gradually declined down to its 15 electoral votes, which is what it was in 1860. Furthermore, the idea that the Electoral College ever benefited the slave states is a myth with no historical basis, as free states have always made up the majority of the electorate. The Electoral College was a genius system created by the Founding Fathers that prevented Boston, New York, and Philadelphia from having massive influence over the elections, and continues to keep LA and New York in check to make sure that the 50 states as a whole decide together who the next president of the United States is every election. I would like to thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. Anyway, guys, we'll see you in the next video.